All right, everybody, welcome to week 2 of your 7314 class, which is your reference course. 7314, week 2. This is your professor, Dr. Jace, and we are going to take care of a little bit of housekeeping, and then we are going to discuss newspaper sources because newspapers are pretty much my favorite thing to kind of browse into when I am doing reference stuff. So I think that's what I am going to start out with, and then we will, in future weeks, we will do some other things. But yeah, the newsy thing, that's probably what I am going to speak about today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the first thing that I did want to tell you all, I know that last week's video was 45 minutes, and they are going to have significant differences in their range. Sometimes they'll be as short as 15 minutes. Sometimes they might hit the hour mark. So I apologize for that. You all are grad students. I can assume you can handle it. I have had undergrads tell me, oh man, it is too much to sit through a 15-minute video. And that was kind of disheartening, but at the same time, that's the way the world is going, I guess. But for grad students, I have my expectations. So, but having said that, again, I know that last week the video was 45 minutes long. And so one thing that you can do if you are subjected to a 45-minute long video or any video where you have a professor such as myself who talks fairly slow, I'm a Southerner, is you can do this. So, I don't own the rights to this music,
Country,
but my lectures are, but my lectures are uploaded into YouTube. So what you can do to kind of speed them up,
where were you when I innovated this cowboy rap? I did this.
you can go to this guy here, go to settings, change the speed, and now you see that it's going a little bit faster. So this is how you can speed my voice up as well. Have a plan. Alright, so that is just to show you again that you can speed me up, and that way maybe a 45-minute video doesn't become so unbearable because, again, I talk slow, so if you speed me up, then it probably makes things a lot easier for you. Let's see here. Okay, so one thing that I am hoping to do is that I am hoping to dive into your discussion board #1 post really quick at some point this week. Well, I'll have to do it at some point this week, but hopefully I can get into those tomorrow. I plan to get lectures recorded today, which is Monday, for my 2 classes, and then hopefully I can take care of some housekeeping from there. Part of that housekeeping being to review your discussion post for this discussion #1, why reference. If you have not already gotten in there, you probably need to do that soon, because participating in the discussion prompts will be part of your grade. I have seen that everybody has gotten themselves all introduced. That's very good. I don't remember if I explained this last week or not, but this free-for-all discussion post, discussion prompt, this is something where you all just have the liberty of talking to one another about pretty much anything. So you can head over to that free-for-all forum and just kind of glance in there. If you want to meet up with some of your classmates who might live in your area for coffee, or talk about television, or talk about the Super Bowl or March Madness or Mizzou basketball and baseball and whatever sports come up. If you want to talk about politics even, just be a little careful. But again, like I said last week, sometimes I will say things that offend people. Sometimes you all will say things that offend me. Sometimes you have to be able to talk about politics in order to in order to really understand what's going on in this world or in this country or whatever, you have to be able to talk about it with people who don't agree. And to a certain extent, yes, this class has to operate as a safe space, but then also, to a certain extent, we have to have some uncomfortable discussions sometimes, and that's going to be the case throughout your entire library career. Your discussion board prompt number 2 is already available, so go ahead and try to get those done by February the 5th. I, believe it or not, even though I am in this field, I'm not the biggest, I don't have the most interest in information seeking and finding. It is something that I have to cover, as that is a huge part of library and information science education. So yes, it does get covered in this class, but there's going to be kind of most of the coverage of that is going to be within your readings and in the discussions for this course. And if you do take a particular interest in it, this book is one that I want to recommend. Let me make myself big here. So this is Theories of Information Behavior. And if you are really into this subject matter, then this is a book that you might be interested in purchasing. So all of the theories of information behavior that are discussed in this course are also discussed in this bad boy right here, as well as a lot of others. So this might be, and you might also be able to get this on interlibrary loan. It's a very popular book. But the best thing probably to do would be to buy your own copy if this is something that you feel you're going to have a particular interest in. So Theories of Information Behavior, and this will give you a good synopsis of all the different information behavior theories. And you will see some of these apply when you are doing some of your assignments for this class, as well as when you are interacting with people at the reference desk. So it's not my favorite thing to really discuss. It's to me, it's kind of dry, but some people just absolutely love and live by this. And so it does get covered a lot in this course. All right, let's do a little pause here. All right, so now let's talk about some news. And we are going to look at both the Mid-Continent Library Public Library System, which is in the Metro Kansas City area, as well as the Mizzou page for retrieving newspaper articles, so that you can see your public and your academic libraries a lot of times have some overlap. And this will be the case not just with news articles, but with a lot of other topics as well, whether it's health or business or whatever. You're going to see some overlap, but you're also going to see some differences in what these, what academic versus public offer. And then, of course, you will also note that some academic libraries have more resources than others in a particular area, and that's also going to be true of public libraries. I come from a rural area in North Carolina, and we don't have nearly the amount of resources at Warren County Memorial Library in North Carolina as what you will see at Mid-Continent here in Metro Kansas City. I got my master's degree from North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina, and that is not a Research One institution, whereas Mizzou is. So you will see a lot more resources here at Mizzou than you would have seen if you were a student, or that you will see if you are today, even though you're not. But if you were enrolled in North Carolina Central's program today, you would see that there is a significant difference in what is offered there compared to what is offered here. North Carolina Central is the only historically black college with a library science program that is accredited at the master's level, and they are more of a comprehensive teaching institution as opposed to a Research One institution like where you are now. So let's take a look here. First, we're just going to do a little bit of compare and contrast. So if you are at the University of Missouri Libraries, this is when you select their databases by type and go to newspaper article databases. Here are your listings. You have Factiva, Newsbank, Newspaper Source, ProQuest for the Chicago Tribune, ProQuest for the New York Times, ProQuest for the Washington Post and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Then you've got African American communities, and that focuses on some traditional black newspapers. You have U.S. Newsstream, Business Source Premier. We'll talk a little bit about that because things get a little funky there. Chronicling America, the historic Missouri Newspaper Project. Illustrated Civil War newspapers. You will have Palmer's Index to the Times, which I'm probably not going to mess with that. That's with the London Times. I'm not going to go through all of these, by the way. It's already overkill to go through a few of them, but you're not going to be here for hours with me going through all of them. ProQuest historical newspapers, the Chicago Defender, which is a black newspaper, African-American newspaper, whichever terminology you want to use, and ProQuest historical papers. So you got those, and we can contrast this to what is offered by Mid-Continent. Now, all of you should have access. You are all Mizzou students, so you should have access to all of these University of Missouri resources here. Mid-Continent, if you are in the coverage range for Mid-Continent Library, and that would pretty much include everyone in the Metro Kansas City area, then you can sign up to get, you can actually sign up online to join Mid-Continent if you're in the Metro KC area. But if you are not, then, and if you are out of their coverage range, then you are going to have to link up with your local public library. And yes, I would prefer that all of you have membership to your local public library in order to, it's going to make things a lot easier if you want to review some of these resources, okay? So you have, for one thing, they offer Access World News, and as you can see over here, we do not, and I'm going to double check, but I don't think, yeah. So Access World News is not offered by Mizzou, but it is offered by, and it is offered by some public libraries, but, it is offered by some academic libraries, but Mizzou is not one of those academic libraries that offers Access World News. Access World News is my favorite one to use because they have so many small town newspapers throughout the United States. So that's why I would hope that your public library has it, since our academic library does not. You have America's Genealogy Bank that goes a little bit outside the traditional newspaper coverage that I'm thinking of. The same with America's Obituaries and Death Notices, but that does exist. You've got the Chicago Tribune, which is standalone. You've got historical newspapers, which I think you have overlap with Mizzou on that. Christian Science Monitor, the Confederate newspapers, so another thing that goes back to the Civil War. You probably, for your public libraries, you will probably have your local newspaper as a standalone. So your Kansas City Star, you've got that. Kansas City Business Journal, we have access granted to that from Mid-Continent. Irish Newspaper Archives, which I've never even looked at. Los Angeles Times, New York Times. And then you have Newsbank Retrospective, which, let me see. Newsbank, yes. The newsbanks are going to be a little different in their coverage between what Mizzou is offering and what Mid-Continent is offering. Newspapers.com, Library Edition. I haven't messed with that too much in the past. We do have the St. Louis Dispatch even within our Kansas City library coverage, so that's cool. We have British newspapers and American newspapers from the 1800s there. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and Newsstream. And then you have the Times Digital Archives again for London. So more than likely, and if I'm telling a lie, somebody please note that in the discussion board. I am not too proud to correct myself. But I think that for some of these, the reason why you might have some overlap is because there are state consortiums. And so there are times when you will have, when an entire state is being offered resources, and every library in the state, be it a public library or academic library, and a host of other types of libraries may have access to that resource, and the state library is paying for it. I've only been in Missouri since August, so I'm still trying to learn what is offered here. I could tell you pretty well what they do in the Carolinas, because I lived in both Carolinas for a number of years, and I dealt with the state libraries. I was actually walking distance from the state library in Columbia, South Carolina, when I lived in South Carolina for 6 years, and that was pretty cool. But having said that, so some of this overlap might be because the access is offered through a state resource as opposed to the individual libraries paying. But you will have consortiums and deals going on all the time, and that's good for everyone. So having said that, let's take a look at some of these guys. Also, I failed to mention that it's pretty standard for some of these different newspapers that are the top newspapers to be offered independently and not in a database with a bunch of the other papers. So when you look at things like, you probably noticed that the New York Times is its own separate database in both Mizzou and at Mid-Continent, and the same can be said for the Wall Street Journal, the same can be said for the Washington Post. And the reason that happens is because those newspapers know that they are in such demand that they can rate out as standalone newspapers. They don't have to go into the databases that are indexing all the newspapers. The New York Times is considered by a lot of people to be America's paper of record. So they can demand sort of standalone access and be a database to themselves, and people will pay that because the New York Times is just that important. And the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, they have similar levels of importance within the field. And the first thing that I want you to kind of look at if you want to get into Access World News, and that's where we are right here. Access World News, Historical and Current, which is a resource of Newsbank. But one feature that I really, really love about Access World News, like I said, is that you can access a lot of small town content on this database. And one thing that I like to do is go to Map Search. And when you go to their Map Search, one thing that you're going to see, and by the way, like I said, I'm doing overviews, guys, so you are not getting in-depth learning on these databases right now. This is to sort of familiarize you with what these different databases do. This is going to be up to you to actually get practice on them and get some real experience with them. You cannot depend on this class for that. It would just take too long. If you want 5-hour lectures, then that's what you're going with. But there's a reason why it takes people 2 to 3 years in order to become really comfortable and really good at doing reference librarianship on databases, is because it's not something that you can just readily learn in the classroom. And if you don't believe me when I tell you that, please reach out to some students at some other schools and they will tell you the same. They are not getting in-depth reference training. They are getting overviews and getting some familiarity with sources. And if you are reading your textbook like assigned, then you will see that the textbook does recommend different resources for you. Okay, so let's say that I did want to go to North America, and let's say there is a particular small town newspaper in North America that I want to deal with. Let's say it's in Missouri. So I can come to North America, then I can come to USA. Then I could come over here, and you see over here to the left that we have a listing, and there are a number of different sources for each state. There are quite a lot in Missouri. I see here 83 sources. So we can click on that. And when you do that, then you will see a listing of the different sources they carry and their coverage range. A lot of them are going to be current from a certain date to current. You have, well, that's the press wire for the states. That's a little different. But for instance, I'm not very familiar, as I told you, with Missouri, but if there's a Boone County in Missouri, and perhaps the county seat is Ashland, I'm not sure. But from 2005 to the current day, they have coverage, full text coverage for this newspaper. And so what you can do is you can go into the newspaper of your choice. It's going to take a little while to load. And you will be brought here. Now you can browse issues by date. So let's say you wanted to look at in 2009 it's just started, and it looks like their coverage is a little spotty here, but let's go to 2018 and see if it's a little better. Okay. Maybe they're a weekly newspaper, I'm not sure, but it looks like they are coming out every Wednesday. I'm seeing very good Wednesday coverage, even though some other things tend to be a little random here. But let's say you wanted to read their edition that came out after Christmas. You could go to December 26th, click it, and you should have your stories listed there. Click one, and you should have your access to your full text. Should have, usually you're going to have an author, but a lot of this is I think that there's some sort of bot or algorithm or something that captures the different information. So sometimes you'll have to do a little digging to find out who your author is if the author isn't stated. But you'll get a word count, you'll get a date, and you'll get these various things here, there. So our author is actually at the end of this one, Bruce Wallace. So sometimes you do have to actually look at the resource or at the article entirely in order to get the information you want. Now, what this should do is this should allow me to also search from 2005 to 2019 and see what comes up. So let's say that I do want to see if there's any coverage of a murder within that time, within that newspaper's coverage area. Okay. And so as you can see, all of these results are for the Boone County Journal, and they are going back and back into the archives for what they have coverage for, at least. And Baker found guilty in infant murder trial. So you saw that keyword popped up, and so it gave me the returns that came back with that keyword. And I was able to look up my stories about murder in this newspaper's coverage area that way. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to show you all, again, I'm just doing overviews, but it's going to be up to you all to sort of get into these resources and check them out. I can't do that in these videos, or they'd be like 8-hour-long videos. But a great thing to do is to create your news alerts if you want them. So let's say that you wanted to make a digest, for instance, and once a week you could have this database tell you, we could leave it on Sunday, but let's say you wanted to create an alert. It's going to give me an opportunity. Okay. This is an alert for all new content. Now, as you're going to see in some of the different newspapers in this resource, and then also in in other databases, you are going to see the ability to make alerts for key things keywords that you are looking up. So I probably won't show that logic again, and so in order to kind of show you what I'm talking about, I'm just going to do it really quick here, and I'll make a Google News alert maybe. Let's see. Sorry, that was the wrong address. So really, you want to go to alerts.google.com. I did news.google.com. You want to go to alerts.google.com. And I already have some alerts created, but I could make an alert about my name. Let's say Jason Austin. And then show some options. Let's say I only want it, let's say I only want it once a week. So I want it once a week. If you select, I think if you select web, blogs, and news, then it's going to go to automatic, but you could limit yourself to news if you wanted to. English, any region, and how many, you could do all results if you wanted. And then you could create an alert. So this is very useful if you are dealing with a class, like let's say you're an embedded librarian in a class, and you have students that have to follow some topic throughout the duration of the semester. Then what you can do, you can have them create those alerts, and that way the students create the alerts, and then they don't have to go searching for the news every single week or whatever. They can set it up for once a day or once a month or once a week or whatever, create a digest, or as it happens, depending on the database, and the different databases are going to do different things. And you can create that, and then the news comes right to the inboxes of the students. So that's very, very helpful. It saves them some time, okay? So let's pause this and look at another resource. Okay, let's actually go into, this is going to be, for those of you who become academic librarians, let's look at our EBSCO resource, newspaper source. I think pretty much any academic library that you all will probably work at will probably have newspaper source. A lot of publics do as well, but EBSCO databases tend to be some of your easiest to use. So let's go into newspaper source. And again, you all of you have access to this as Mizzou students. So, and let's do a basic search, and then we'll probably play around with some of these features here. But let's do a basic search. Let's say, and let's put it in quotes. Let's say we wanted to look up the Donald, the 45th president of the United States. And let's say we wanted to look at, I don't know, immigration. Seems to be the talk of the town these days. So we could do Donald Trump and immigration as a base search. Now, first of all, let me take these off, these quotation marks off, so that you can see a little difference here. So we have 7,000 things come up in our returns, and we want to take that down. So one thing we could possibly do is go to Donald Trump in quotes and immigration and search. And as you can see, we go from 7,000 things to 5,000 things. So you have that. And one other thing that you, well, a few other things that you might want to do. Let's see if I can move my little window here. Okay. You should not have, in newspaper source, you really shouldn't have scholarly articles. These articles, newspaper articles, do not go through peer review. They go through an editorial process. Yeah, see, when I do that, it takes everything away. So an editorial process is not the same as peer review. So let's take that off. But let's see. Let's say we just want to deal with full text. And let's say we only want to deal with since he has been president. So we can come here and we can change this to, it was inaugurated in 2017. So let's change it to that. And then we have 2017 to the present. And we have gone from 5,000 things to about 2,200 things. Now what we can do is we can select one of our records. And we can actually do quite a few things with what we have over here. I've got to keep moving this window. So I'm going to scroll down. I have my title here. There are a lot of authors. Oh, this is from CNN. That's why there's so many authors. I was like, what is going on? So let's see if we can find something else that's in a newspaper. What is NPR, Fox News? Go away, go away. Okay. I am shaking my head. All of this NPR stuff. Let me pause this. Okay, and what I had to do in real time was I added a third field here for journal name or source, which is what SO stands for, and then I put a not over here, so not NPR. I've still got CNN things coming up, as you can see. I've still got Fox News coming up, but finally I am going down, and I like this. So the Dallas Morning News, so they've got something. Okay, so you can read the full text of that article there. This is actually a letter to the editor, but you can read the full text to that letter to the editor. And then what you can do is you have some helpful resources that are, or some helpful options to the side. For one thing, if you are sharing articles, you do not usually just want to grab this URL from the URL box. You are in an EBSCO database. You're usually going to want to come down and grab your permalink. So you can click permalink, you can copy and paste this, and this should be shareable. So this is generally a much better option than just copying your URL. Okay. Some other things, I usually email things to myself just so that I don't lose them. So you can email these to friends or whatever, and send yourself an email. Can send that to my personal account here. Then just click send, and I'll have that show up in my inbox. You can use this to, you have this option to save it probably in an HTML form. Let's see. Yeah, so you can do an HTML save. There are articles that are going to come up that are going to be in a PDF option, and you can save those as well, those PDFs. And then a thing that I want you all to be careful about. When you are in EBSCO databases, they do have the option for citations. These citations, I believe, are only correct about, I think it's 70% of the time. So they are correct more often than not, but there's no actual human being checking these citations. So if you just copy and paste these citations, there's a good chance that they're going to be wrong. What you want to do is you can use these as a starting point, but you are going to want to actually check your citations against the Purdue OWL or whatever and just make sure that they are correct. You may be able to get some help from a writing lab or something on campus. Different librarians have different competencies with citations, so you could chat with a librarian possibly and ask if the citation is right. But I've worked at enough schools now to know that some institutions really do trust the librarians to teach students how to cite, and some say, hey, that's out of your territory. Don't teach the students how to cite because y'all teach them incorrectly. So that's going to vary from school to school, okay? But this is, so this is a newspaper source. And again, I prefer Newsbank. I prefer World Access News a little better than this one. And I tend to get a lot of peripheral results and not a lot of direct hits within this one. Okay. Now, if you're doing an advanced search within this one, then one thing that you can do is you can come back over here, and I've got to move the screen a little bit, but you have options for applying related words, and that can sometimes cut down on the amount of, I guess you can say, the amount of synonym searching that you have to use. You can search within full text of the articles if you like. I actually think that that's a default in a lot of EBSCO databases, so I'm a little surprised that it's not here. But these are some options that you can use to regulate what you get in returns. And then as far as publication type, so you saw we were getting all that NPR stuff earlier. Let's say that we don't want that. I believe the NPR stuff is going to come mostly in transcripts. So what you can do is you can select newspaper, and then you can, if you want it to come over here, let's say you did not want to deal with a letter to the editor, you could quite possibly do article here, and theoretically at least this will get rid of some of that letter to the editor-y stuff. So let's see what happens when we do that. Okay. So yeah, then we come up with the New York Times, but the New York Times is a standalone database usually, so you can see we don't have that full text option here. Wall Street Journal, same thing. So in order to get rid of that, we would come back over here and click this full text button again. And now you can see we have a very small list of results, 149 results, but we should have full text options for all of these. I do see that we've got transcripts coming back up. This is from MSNBC, from Meet the Press. This is a New York Times article that got printed in the Toronto Star, so that's a little workaround, I guess, and you can click that full text. And you can see the article as it ran in the Toronto Star, allegedly, assuming that this thing is going to load. Let me pause it. Okay, so that article finally loaded. And so now you can see I have the full text to that article there as it ran in the Toronto Star. Okay. Now, I'm honestly not sure. We are now in Factiva. So this is, again, offered by the University of Missouri. It's something you all have access to. Factiva, I've only used it really for company research. I've not used it for anything else. I don't know if it does anything else, but I use it for companies and markets. So this is probably something we're going to see again when I go over business resources. But again, for one thing, can create alerts in this database, so that's very helpful. Sometimes you might have business students who have to track a particular business throughout the course of a semester, and so this might be the way to go when they are setting up their alerts. But what you can do is with Factiva, let's say we've got a company. Revlon is a weird company in that it's not the company that everyone thinks of when they think of a company, but I've noticed that when you're trying to teach business databases, they are one of those few companies where you don't get too much and you don't get too little. So they are a company that I go with. So let's say you wanted to do Revlon Incorporated. And if you wanted to remove them, you could just click that and then you could click remove, or you could do a list that excluded Revlon. So you could do Boolean logic, and let's say I wanted to do, for instance, I don't know, let's say I wanted to do Revlon and Sears, I don't know, Sears, but then I could turn this into not Sears. So that's how that Boolean logic works. And so this would bring me back returns that discuss Revlon, but do not, it would exclude anything that had Sears Holdings Corporation in it. Then you can come back over here. You can change the date range, so you can have, I'm going to limit it to the last month. And the duplicates, I just usually keep it at identical, because what it's going to do is it's going to show you the a number of duplicates. You'll see what I mean here. So let's do the search. Waiting. All right. So yeah, once you come into this, you will see a number of results they gave me 50 results. I think they might cap at 50, but they've got 8 duplicate results. So the duplicate results can be, for instance, something that is the same article in 2 different newspapers that came through a wire or something like that. But you can do that, and then you've got sort of a thing that shows you how many, and it looks like we've got 8 hits on January 3rd. So you could click that and just see your range, your dates for that day, your articles for that day, your returns for that day. And then you could go ahead and pick one. As you can see, we've got duplicates here. Just in. This is probably, even though it's headlined the same way, newspapers do their own headlines. So even though it's headlined the same way, even though it's headlined different ways, it might be the same article. But what we can do is we can go into one of these, and then we can look at our full text. And you have those same buttons. You can email it, print it, save it, downloads, enrich text format. And I don't know if this database has its own citation feature or not. But again, I recommend you create your own citations. So that's Factiva in a nutshell. This is very useful when you're trying to do business news information. Another one that is useful for business news information will be your Business Source Premier or Business Source Complete, depending on what institution you're dealing with. So let's go back to that. So with this database, we are dealing with Business Source Premier. Not with this database. With this, it's a little late, guys. With this, with Missouri, we are dealing with Business Source Complete, okay? Business Source Premier. So Business Source Premier, I think it lacks a few of the features that Business Source Complete has, but they are ultimately pretty much the same thing. You have to get into a lot of nuance in order to find out something about, in order to find something that you'll find in Complete that you won't find in Premier. Okay? And there are many, many ways to search this database, including you can search companies by NAICS code, and that can be pretty useful. In fact, let's do that right now. Let me look up Revlon's NAICS code because I don't know it. Okay, so Revlon's primary NAICS code, I copied and pasted it, and that is from cosmetics. And you can put that in, and then you can search by NAICS code and search. And so this isn't a search for Revlon specifically. It's a search for pretty much any business article where the companies fall under this NAICS code. So you can put that in, click search. And so what's going to happen is you're mostly going to get returns for cosmetic industry sorts of things. Let's actually click this guy here and see. So this appeared in Money, which is, I don't know too much about that particular source, but that's where that appeared. And then you can see you've got industry NAICS codes here, and you can search by one of these. If you were to click one of these, you would just get the returns for that particular NAICS code, just like we just did. Or if you wanted to search cosmetics as a subject term, you could come to subject terms, click cosmetics, and you'd be brought here. Okay. And then the features are very similar to what you saw with the other. Well, I say they're similar, but you're going to see different buttons for the different EBSCO databases. But EBSCO is on the cutting edge of the database game, really. And then if you are to search in an advanced search, then you would have a lot of different abilities for searching for specific things that you wouldn't in the basic search. Okay, so you could look for obituaries, letters, editorials. You could look for different types, different document types. There might be a little bit of peer-reviewed information in Business Source Premier, but there's not going to be a whole heck of a lot of it. And then this is a great place to go for a SWOT analysis. So let's say you wanted I don't know if you'd have specifically a SWOT analysis of Revlon, but let's see what happens when we just browse by SWOT analysis. Let's see. Actually, let's see if we can find Revlon here. Yep, we've got a Revlon SWOT analysis. This is extremely old. It's from 2008, but we do have one. And you could go in there. Okay. My PDF full text is actually blacked out here, so I don't know that I even have access to that. But this is just do search options here. Hold on. Okay, and what I've done is I've gone back to the advanced search screen, and then I've just put in at this point SWOT analysis and then my NAICS code, and let's see what comes up. Okay, so there is okay, so this is what I was really looking for, a Revlon SWOT analysis, and this is from 2018. You can click that full text. And SWOT analyses are going to be very useful for business students. So play around with Business Source Premier. And let's look at a few others. I'm probably going to try to end this at an hour. This is actually going to be the last one that I am going to take you all through. Again, on your own time, a good idea will be to go through some of these individually and just see what you're kind of working with. So Wall Street Journal, just like Washington Post and New York Times, is sort of independently offered. And so the best way to search the Wall Street Journal will be to come straight to the Wall Street Journal page. And let's do an advanced search just so you can see how this works. Wall Street Journal is offered through ProQuest. So looks a little different from your EBSCO. ProQuest, Gale, and EBSCO are typically your big players. I actually did not realize you could search by NAICS codes in Wall Street Journal. So let's try doing that. So we'll look for our NAICS code and see what pops up. And we can do it all. Newspapers and magazines, why not? You can look up your NAICS codes if you need to. And a lot of times you can just Google NAICS codes, but when we get into the business resources, we're going to see some different ways that you can look those up, okay? But for right now, I'm just going to put in our old NAICS codes for cosmetics and click search. Okay. So I've got a listing here, and this listing is going back 20 years. Trust me, there's been a lot more written about cosmetics in the Wall Street Journal than 320 things in the past 20 years. Trust me. But what happens is this stuff has to be cataloged this way in order for it to come. So only 320 things have been cataloged with this NAICS code. And so that's why you're seeing the small amount of results that you're seeing. And you can pick one, and you should automatically have your full text there. In order to have your citation information, again, you might have to browse around. Sample citations, again, come through here. J. Jamerson, which is Joshua Jamerson. Let me get out of that. So you've got your author there, you've got your publication there, and the other relevant information you would need for APA. You would have your article title, you would have your date, and you would have a permalink here. So again, this may be mostly correct, but you are going to want to double check, okay? And so that's a little rundown of our newspaper resources. as far as getting into historical newspapers and things like that, again, that's something, if you've got the interest, do it on your own time. You can talk about it in the discussion board if you'd like as well. Maybe I can make a new discussion board post for that. But this is going to wrap it up here. We are at 50 minutes. So thank you for your attention, and we will see you next week.